To further explain an economic development tool that we would like to utilize in the city. We made our first presentation last year and presented how blight hurts communities in many ways. Blight poses serious health and safety hazards, costs the city for enforcement and maintenance, reduces property values and tax revenue, and just makes us less attractive for investment in the city. And a land bank tool allows us to improve economic development and investment in our city. And I just want you to know that this tool is not just a whim of the mayor. Over the past decade, the state has expanded the tools available to local government to fight blight. And in addition, our own Grow Lebanon 2020 plan that was released in May of 2015, and all of you were actually a part of those focus groups and public meetings regarding its creation and implementation. And establishing a land bank was one of the action items from that plan. A land bank can address problem properties that need to be cleared of debt, that need to be maintained. We can make them available for private purchase so they can become productive properties again, because these properties are sitting there where the owner has really abandoned the property for the most part, taxes are not being paid and we're not receiving revenue, and they're falling into a deteriorated state. Also, a land bank can help us with a weak or distressed market for manage that better, I guess you could say. So we want to create a housing stock that's stable, which can be a catalyst for economic development. So today, in order to assist with our presentation, the city hired a consultant, Gulotta. Chris was the executive director of the Cumberland County Housing and Redevelopment Authorities for more than 30 years, and now he has his own consulting company. He's worked with numerous communities across the state, addressing blighted properties in general and specifically helping to form land banks. And we thought it was pertinent and an absolute need to bring him on so that we would have his expertise and help with our presentation, because it's something that is extremely important to the city of Lebanon and how we proceed with economic development and reinvestment in the city. And of course, Betsy Bowman, everyone knows Betsy from the Lebanon County Redevelopment and Housing Authority. And I have two staff members, Melissa Quinones, who's the Director of Administration, and Janelle Mendoff, who's our Community and Economic Development Officer. So Chris?
Okay, thanks. I'm going to distribute two handouts. I had sent these to the Redevelopment Authority last week, but they did not get to you, and I apologize for that. And do you have a copy of that? I didn't say a copy for myself. And I think the mayor did a very nice job in describing the rationale for a land bank. But I think the proof is in the performance of land banks in Pennsylvania in terms of what they're accomplishing. And so I had prepared this last week to share with you some of the higher performing land banks in Pennsylvania and what they're doing. And since you did not get this in advance, I'm going to spend a few minutes just going through this. In Dauphin County, they have been successful in acquiring properties, a foreclosure property, and making that available to a first-time buyer. They've also acquired a row of blighted properties and are in the process of beginning construction of infill housing in Susquehanna Township. Lackawanna County has been very active, and actually Lackawanna County at this point, the only participating community is the city of Scranton. They hope to attract additional communities, but in the city of Scranton, the land bank there has sold 50 properties from the county repository as side yards, side lots to adjoining property owners, and so they're having a lot of success, and they're looking at doing more of that and repurposing also some blighted properties for economic development purposes as well. In Lancaster County, the land bank there has acquired 5 properties in Columbia Borough. 2 properties have been sold to a developer for rehabilitation. A 3rd property has been sold to a community action program for renovation in conjunction with a workforce development program. In Lawrence County, the land bank sold 3 properties in the city of Newcastle. They were on the county repository of unsold properties. They were sold to a nonprofit that is rehabilitating those properties for sale to persons with disabilities. And I was out there last month and saw the good work they're doing, that organization. In addition to that, as a result of my technical assistance to that land bank and to the city, they're launching a side yard disposition program in Newcastle next month to acquire properties from the county repository for sale to adjoining property owners. And the idea again is to get these properties back on the tax rolls so they're generating taxes. And so you see both Lackawanna County and Lawrence County looking at those activities here in the early days of land banks. And by the way, we're still in the early days of land banks in Pennsylvania. While the legislation was passed in 2012, most of these have been formed in the last year or so. And so I think their work has been impressive to date, given the fact that the vast majority have only been in operating for a year or so. Schuylkill County, where I do extensive work, the land bank there was able to acquire property from Wells Fargo Bank. That property was rehabilitated and sold to a modest income buyer. 5 properties have been acquired by that land bank at the judicial sales last year and this year. 2 properties are in the process of being rehabilitated and sold to first-time buyers. 1 property in Minersville Borough has been demolished and is being redeveloped for mixed-use development. 1 property has been acquired and will be demolished for new townhome development in Shenandoah. And then 1 property has been acquired and has been included in a master plan for the redevelopment of an entire block in Frackville. And finally, Westmoreland County, and I worked with them back in 2013. Dauphin County was the first to approve a land bank, and Westmoreland was the second in 2013. They've acquired 91 properties to date. 55 properties have been sold, generating $27,627 in new tax revenue, and another 4 properties have been rehabilitated for first-time buyers. So they are doing good work, as the mayor indicated. What they're doing, by and large, is really creating an environment for private investment. And by that I mean, I don't think that's necessarily limited to private developers or economic developers. What is happening is, and you see this in parts of Schuylkill County, when blighted properties are rehabilitated, you see property owners, residents in that area, beginning to invest in their neighborhood with improvements. And so when I talk about encouraging or setting the table for private investment, it's not just developers, but private individuals who own property, residents, owner-occupied residents in neighborhoods that are benefiting from this program and now beginning to see the logic, if you will, in beginning to put money in their property to improve their property. So this is a program that is making a difference in Pennsylvania. There were some proposed changes, Mayor. I don't know if you want to go through these. I can certainly go through the changes in the intergovernmental agreement that I think are designed, in all honesty, to give you more control of this process. The first is the fact that the land bank would submit a list of properties it's interested. The city land bank would provide you with a list of properties it's interested in acquiring at the judicial sale, along with a write-up of each property, and that's this page. This is what I use for the Tax Claim Bureau in Schuylkill County when we look to acquire properties at the judicial sale. So you would not only have a property address, but basically a profile, not of just the property, but the owner of the property. Because if I'm in your shoes, I want to know a little bit of background on that ownership and be satisfied that you're not displacing anyone, particularly someone on a fixed income. And by the way, by and large, the vast majority of properties, and to my knowledge, all the properties that have been acquired by land banks in Pennsylvania have been vacant properties and not occupied by owner occupants that have failed to pay their taxes. But just to give you assurances and to give you control of this process, you'll see language now under paragraph 2, basically providing that you have that opportunity to strike, if you will, any properties that the land bank would like to acquire at a judicial sale. The other thing that has been added to this agreement is language that provides you with details of a subsequent buyer pre-qualification program. I think one of the things the land bank does not want to do is get in the way of the good work that the private sector does in terms of redeveloping properties. Having said that, there may be some advantage to having land bank acquire properties that developers have an interest in, because then those developers wouldn't have to bid against speculators at the judicial sale. And so what you see in that pre-qualification program is an effort to really partner with private developers, have those developers share information about their interest in a particular property, and then essentially make sure they're vetted by the land bank, that they're in good standing with all taxing jurisdictions, that would be county, school district, and city, and if they are, then have an understanding between the land bank and that particular party that would like to acquire the property at the judicial sale, that the land bank would be willing to sell them that property after the judicial sale. So this is a good way that land banks can partner with the private sector so that speculators are kept out of this process. So those are the two changes. There is some language also under paragraph 3 that provides that the county has 10 business days to review that list of properties that the land bank proposes to acquire at the judicial sale, and essentially you would be able to strike any properties from that list. So this is, I think, a good compromise, if you will, in the sense that it does give the county control of this process. Certainly should give you a comfort level that what the land bank is doing is consistent with notions of fairness and justice.
Okay. Comments?
I do have comments, if they're in order. I'd just like to start by saying there are going to be issues on which we disagree, and I hope to do that respectfully. I do have a list of concerns that I'd like to share. Right now, we already have something to address blight called the First-Time Home Buyer and the Vacant Property Reinvestment Board to address blight. Number 2, cities like St. Louis and Philadelphia have become the major landowners in their communities. They own 25% of all properties and spend tens of thousands of dollars annually on upkeep. Number 3, in this proposal, historic structures are not addressed. Number 4, hazardous sites, including lead and underground storage tanks, not just for commercial but also for residential units, are not addressed. All properties need an environmental assessment if a government agency is going to take them over, in my opinion. Number 5, tax burden county taxpayers. Even after land banks properties are sold, according to this contract that you would like us to pass, the county would be billed 50% of collected taxes for an additional 5 years. That's a tax shift to the taxpayers of the rest of the county. Municipalities are land-strapped and can file for bankruptcy. So if we do this for the city of Lebanon, we have already been approached by a similar program from Myerstown, and I hear people in Palmyra who have concerns as well. And this is a part that may sound hard, but when I read it, it is my interpretation of what I read. Adding the clause for county approval means the city transfers the blame for eminent domain to the county. Eminent domain at least reimburses owners the assessed value of the property. Land banks do not pay homeowners anything. It's a true taking that is worse than eminent domain. Some of the articles that I read said that part of the problem is issuing demolition permits and other permits in a timely manner. I have not heard that that has been addressed. Therefore, that is something that I'd like to know more about. Continued use of public services by the properties even after they're sold for that 5-year period doesn't seem fair to eliminate or 50% of taxes. They're still utilizing fire, police, public schools, etc. I believe that this simply creates a middleman, and in many instances, Right now, banks donate properties to Habitat for Humanity for rehab, and now they would have to go through a third level. That doesn't seem fair. Those are my comments, having read through your proposal, and I think they're fairly consistent from the first time this was brought forward, with some additional comments based on the language changes. So thank you for listening.
Would you like me to respond?
It's your call.
You want to tag team?
Sure, why don't you get started?
Okay, so I tried to catch all of them as best as I could. So the first time home buyers program and the rehab, I'm not sure the exact name that you used. Yes, the city and the county has a first time home buyers program. Usually those properties are already ready for someone to go through the classes, and they buy a property that's recently been renovated or maybe needs some minor rehabilitation. It's not a property that has sat for a long period of time, that's vacant, that has deteriorated to the point where it really shouldn't be occupied or can't be occupied. So those are totally different programs. Those are good programs, and of course we use those because our goal is to have more owner-occupied properties, but it's completely separate from what we're trying to accomplish here. We're trying to address blighted properties. As to the point of owning, a municipality owning, and I don't know which municipality you indicated, over 25% of properties in their borders, that is not the goal of this land bank. We don't have that much money to acquire that many properties. We're talking about, a couple properties over a couple year period of time.
But I see that as, if they can't get sold, those properties continue to accumulate, and over the years that they've been in effect, that's where they're growing to 25%.
If you look at the bylaws of our land bank, that is not our goal. Our goal is to turn them over as soon as possible, because we want to use our money, get the most bang for our buck.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not going to just keep acquiring properties. We're taking one at a time for the most part and addressing them, and maybe two at a time. But it's not going to be that. We can't afford it, and it's not in our bylaws to do that. Of course, we'll know about the hazardous materials because the city is involved with the properties. We know if they've been condemned or not. We'll know what situations are there. And of course, we're going to follow all local laws and higher laws. We would hope that more municipalities would want to do this because, again, you're not receiving tax revenue now, and this is a way to return the property to a productive use, because bottom line, no legitimate investor wants these properties because it's going to cost more to rehabilitate them than what the market value of the property is. And that's why we need to come up with another plan. How can we make them productive pieces of property? We have some people who think they're investors that buy these properties and they put nothing into them and they sit there or they do the bare minimum, and that's not our goal. It's to make them productive, to rehabilitate them and get owner-occupied people in there, and that's one of the items in our bylaws as well, that they would become owner-occupied houses and not renter, because a lot of these investors come in and they make them into rental units, and that's not our goal. And we definitely are working with Habitat. We're working with Habitat right now on some properties that were destroyed by fire. Our goal is always to make Habitat our priority. And if a bank wants to donate a property to Habitat, they can do that without being involved in this process. And I think that addresses most of them. In a nutshell, very quickly, I apologize.
Yeah, and let me just pick up on some of the mayor's comments, and I will be brief because I think she covered most of the issues. The sharing of taxes, though, and the thought that this is somehow cutting into the revenue of the taxing authorities, I would argue that, again, you're only sharing taxes with a land bank to the extent that they have succeeded in putting that property back on the tax rolls. So you weren't getting anything prior to that, and now you're going to get half a loaf for 5 years. So it's truly a win-win situation, I think, for the taxing authorities as well as the land bank. And keep in mind, the land bank doesn't get paid. And I think this addresses Commissioner Litz's point. Land bank doesn't get paid through that tax sharing mechanism until it succeeds in moving that property out of its portfolio. And because of the way this land bank is funded, it has to move those properties in order to succeed financially, unlike the city of Philadelphia, and I can't speak to St. Louis because that's different enabling legislation, but to the extent that Philadelphia has capitalized their land bank with millions of dollars, there's no incentive for them to move those properties out. This land bank, that's their source of revenue, is the sale of these properties. So in order to succeed, it has to move those properties. And candidly, why wouldn't it want to do that? I mean, its mission is to see these properties repurposed. Finally, on the point about maybe this being a de facto eminent domain action, it's not that, because the owners have the right to redeem the property up until the judicial sale. This isn't a taking of property. The owner has the right to redeem the property, pay the taxes up until that point. Property is only going up for judicial sale, which, by the way, is allowed under state law, as you know, when the owner hasn't paid the property. And so, I would respectfully disagree that it's even a de facto eminent domain, because, again, I don't think the owner in this case has lived up to their obligations as a good citizen. They haven't played by the rules. So I think, those would be my comments.
You're seeking a motion?
I'd like to counter one or two of those points, if I
Okay.
may.
And then we'll.
Sure. On the county, not the county, the state website, I printed off, and it specifically says, a land bank is a government or nonprofit entity created to acquire abandoned property through donation, foreclosure, and eminent domain, to hold the property, and when possible, etc. So it says it right on the state website that it is eminent domain.
And what website is that you're reading
The
from?
state's website.
Okay.
I had provided a copy previously. And also, a lot of the information I got actually was appearing in the July 2nd, 2017 Lebanon Daily News on page 3A. So there's a lot of information there that I gleaned initially.
Well, Commissioner, again, with all due respect, that is just plain wrong. You have the land bank law in front of you, section 2108 says that land banks do not possess the power of eminent domain. So whoever developed that information on the website is just wrong.
I'm ready to move on the modified land bank plan as presented. Yep.
Do I have a second?
I prefer not to, thank you.
Okay. I am going to second the motion, and I'm going to speak a little bit to what has transpired and somewhat in response to Commissioner Litz's position on this. I would first of all like to congratulate the mayor and her staff and Betsy and the redevelopment authority folks for listening to me and some of the concerns that I had with this, because I feel perhaps not 100% of what I would have liked, but at least you listened and you made modifications to the plan, and you responded to one of the things that I understood Commissioner Litz would have liked, but now she doesn't like it, and that is to give the county commissioners more involvement and more in control of the process. So I thank you for accommodating at least me and my concerns there. And Betsy, would you like to comment on the resource guide that we put together now?
Sure. We provided you with a draft copy of a tax foreclosure resource guide. We still have a little bit of work to do on it, but our thinking was that this would be distributed when the first notice goes out, and maybe Sally can help me on that one, but when the first notice goes out prior to the upset sale, that this would be something that could be included in that, possibly to assist these people in coming up with some way to pay their taxes. But we would also want this to be available and distributed to other agencies that exist, like the Probe Office, or just anywhere that we could get this information out. And again, it's not in a final form. There may be some opportunities that we should be adding to this, but I at least wanted to get you as much as we had at this point, and we would be distributing that as well.
I commend you for your efforts on that. Because it was only laying here a few minutes ago, I didn't have a chance to read through the whole document, so I can provide feedback on it later.
Sure.
So to sum up, and not to belabor the length of this meeting, because it's already a long meeting, but again, I feel that you have both the city and their consultant and redevelopment authority has accommodated and responded to some of my concerns in a serious manner. And sometimes you do change a person's mind, because in this case, it's one of the things that I'm proud of. I can be persuaded. I just want the facts, or I want something that is going to better serve the people of Lebanon County. And I think the changes that we've worked together to create here are going to serve the people of Lebanon County in a better way, and make it just the fact that this board, whoever are the commissioners at that time, there'll be 6 more eyes looking at this process and whether or not we're being totally fair in what we're doing here. So with that said, I will second the motion. And is there any further discussion on the motion to adopt the land bank as presented by the City of Lebanon?
Would you indulge me for just a couple of questions on
Sure.
this? Your motion, I presume, is to enter into this, the agreement that's been presented to you with the changes they made, that were highlighted and so on. I would recommend just a little bit of tweaking to the paragraph that talks about the 10 business days to review and so on. So my question is, are you approving it as written, or is there an opportunity to still make a couple of those wording
Well,
changes in
of
there?
course, it's their document, but if
I
we
would
can
have the
agree on.
solicitor review it.
Well, agreed, right. It's just with respect to the county being able to have 10 days to
Yeah.
review the list, strike any and all, and so on.
The purpose is because we don't have a lot of time from when the list
Right.
comes out to when it goes up on sale.
Right, but and it's only gonna be once a year, a judicial sale, right? Okay, so what I think would be, probably the best approach would be if they were to review it, discuss it in an open meeting, and formally adopt that list to be presented or to be forwarded on. Sometimes we don't have 10 days between meetings, so could it be worded maybe in such a way that 10 business days or the first commissioners, or the next available commissioners meeting, whichever comes first? I mean, it's not to drag the process out, it's just to make sure we can still have enough time to do that.
Yeah, I'll let the mayor respond, but I think you got a nod of the head from her, yes.
Okay. And then also maybe some recognition that there will be a formal adoption, or formally, those would be my suggestions to it.
Well, you and I talked about that yesterday. I thought you had forwarded that information.
No, I didn't get a chance to talk to anyone about it, so but I just think
We could do that.
that would
We
solidify
would give you a
the
list.
process.
Now, at the time that it gets closer to the sale, when we would start, the list may be shorter, because some properties may have come off, but we can do that.
Yeah.
We can reword that
And
to.
we actually would require board action then to approve the list, or modify the list and approve it.
So what you were probably talking about over there, how far in advance is the list published?
Well, I mean, your first initial list comes out in August for the September sale. Of course,
Okay.
that's a lot bigger.
Right.
So those same properties, though, will be carried forward to judicial sale if they're not sold or paid at upset.
And
Or-
then
or
that's
paid
published how
between-
far in advance of the actual sale?
Well, that'll be on our website once we finish up the upset sale and we have the orders from the judges and stuff, and the judicial sale set.
So weeks ahead?
Yeah, I think it would be some weeks, you know.
Okay.
The major part of it is to get it approved and the date set by the judge, but we still know what homes basically
Yep.
should be on it unless they're paid or,
Okay. And then my second is just a comment, and Melissa and I spoke briefly about this. The land bank itself, the governing board of the land bank will be, its liability is covered under the city's liability, because it's city land bank. And I brought that up because of these other counties, for example, Dauphin, Schuylkill, Lawrence, Westmoreland, I think they're all in the same insurance pool that we belong to. And so the question has come up, and there have been inquiries made to counties, do you have a land bank? And, you know, if it's a county land bank, then the errors and omissions and so on fall into the county. But this is a city land bank, so this one's yours. Just wanted to clarify.
And by the way, there are city land banks. There are about 17 land banks in Pennsylvania. I would say about 2/3 are county land banks, but there are some city land banks.
And the question about liability, we can run that by the solicitor too.
Yeah, I mean, in essence, for example, if the land bank were somehow, if they were sued, named in a suit or something, who would provide that defense? In this case, it would be the city's insurance policy that would defend any sort of claim like that.
All right, so do we want to take action? Do we want to vote on this motion? Can we tweak it to the point where it's votable?
Well, I think, from what I'm hearing, is just the 10-day and allowing, you're agreeable to that, so maybe that you can.
And the solicitor's review.
Yeah, you can approve it pending those changes in the solicitor's review, and then.
Are you making a motion?
No, I'm not. You already have a motion on the floor. I'm just
Okay.
saying that the solicitor should be reviewing the contract.
And we always do.
We do that with everything, so.
It should be on the record that it's subject to.
Well, you put it on record then. Thank you.
Call the question.
All right, and make sure that we have the solicitor's review on record. All right, all those in favor of the motion as presented indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries 2-1.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Betsy, thanks for your efforts.
Thank you. I have had some help from the city as well. Thank you.
And thank
It
Dan
is
too.
formed.
Okay, will do.
It was formed last year, city council, I think it was February or March. I'd have to look back.
I think.
The city formed it.